The recycled air inside Gate 14 at JFK International Airport tasted metallic and stale. Maya Richardson sat cross-legged in a corner seat near the charging station, her worn denim jacket draped over her lap, earbuds dangling around her neck playing nothing. She wasn't listening to music. She was listening to the silence between heartbeats, that peculiar stillness that comes before everything changes. At 17, Maya had learned to make herself small, not physically, but energetically. She occupied space the way a shadow does, present but easily overlooked. Her natural hair was pulled back in a simple bun, her face bare of makeup, her backpack resting against scuffed Converse sneakers that had carried her through 3 years of high school. She looked like any other teenager waiting for a flight, except for the careful way she held herself, like someone who had learned that visibility sometimes comes with a price. The boarding pass on her phone screen glowed with promise. Seat 2A, first class, flight 402 to Los Angeles. It was a gift from her grandmother, a reward for getting accepted to UCLA with a full academic scholarship. "You deserve to fly like you matter," her grandmother had said, pressing the confirmation into Maya's hand with tears in her eyes. Maya had never flown first class before. She had barely flown at all. The gate area hummed with the usual pre-boarding chaos, business people typing frantically on laptops, families wrangling restless children, the rhythmic announcements from the gate agent's microphone. Maya observed it all with the practiced detachment of someone used to being on the outside looking in. She didn't notice the group approaching until their laughter cut through the ambient noise like breaking glass. 4 teenagers, probably her age, moved through the gate area with the casual confidence of people who had never been told they didn't belong anywhere. The leader was a tall white boy with perfectly styled blonde hair, wearing a burgundy varsity jacket that probably cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe. His name was Preston Holbrook, though Maya didn't know that yet. She only knew that when his eyes swept across the gate area and landed on her, something in his expression sharpened. Preston nudged the girl beside him, a petite brunette with flawless makeup and designer luggage, and whispered something that made her cover her mouth while laughing. Maya felt the familiar prickle of attention, the kind that never meant anything good. She dropped her gaze to her phone, pretending to be absorbed in something important. But she could feel them watching her, assessing her, making calculations about who she was and what she represented in their carefully ordered world. "Ladies and gentlemen," the gate agent's voice crackled over the speaker, "we will now begin boarding flight 402 to Los Angeles. We invite our first-class passengers and those needing special assistance to board at this time." Maya stood, slinging her backpack over one shoulder. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from excitement anymore, but from the sudden awareness that Preston's group had also moved toward the priority boarding lane. She joined the short line of first-class passengers, mostly business travelers in expensive suits. She felt conspicuously young, conspicuously casual, conspicuously out of place. The gate agent, a middle-aged white woman with severely pulled-back hair and a name tag that read Barbara Jenkins, looked up as Maya approached. Her professional smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, a micro-expression of doubt that Maya had learned to recognize long ago. "Boarding pass, please," Barbara said, her tone shifting to something Maya couldn't quite name, not openly hostile, but not welcoming either. Maya held out her phone. Barbara took it, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the screen. She looked at Maya, then back at the phone, then at Maya again. "This seat assignment," Barbara said slowly. "Are you sure this is correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Maya replied, keeping her voice even. "My grandmother purchased it for me. It's a graduation gift." Barbara's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm going to need to verify this. Please step aside." Maya's stomach dropped. "Is there a problem?" "I have the confirmation email," the receipt. Please step aside, Barbara repeated, more firmly this time. You're holding up the line. Maya moved to the side, her face burning. Behind her, she heard Preston's distinctive laugh, not loud enough to be obviously directed at her, but perfectly timed to make the connection clear. She pulled up her email app with shaking fingers, scrolling to find her grandmother's forwarded confirmation. The line continued moving. Business travelers in pressed shirts and polished shoes scanned their passes with efficient beeps and proceeded down the jetway. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Barbara made a show of typing on her computer, picking up her desk phone, having a hushed conversation while occasionally glancing at Maya with theatrical suspicion. Maya stood frozen in that liminal space between the gate and freedom, neither passenger nor trespasser. Just a girl waiting for someone to decide whether she deserved what she'd been given. Preston and his group had paused near the boarding door, their passes already scanned, apparently in no hurry to actually board. They stood in a loose cluster, close enough to witness Maya's humiliation, but far enough to maintain plausible deniability. I wonder what the holdup is, Preston said to his friends, his voice pitched just loud enough to carry. You know how it is. Sometimes people try to sneak into first class. System catches them eventually. His friend, a stocky boy with a backwards baseball cap, snorted. Yeah, or they use stolen credit cards or something. I saw that on the news once. Maya kept her eyes on her phone, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. She wanted to scream, to throw her boarding pass in Barbara's face, to demand the respect she deserved. But she knew better. She had learned this lesson in 1,000 small ways throughout her life, that anger from someone who looked like her would be seen as aggression, that defending herself would be interpreted as attitude, that her emotions were not entitled to the same validity as theirs. Barbara finally hung up the phone and beckoned Maya forward with a single finger, as if summoning a misbehaving child. The system shows some irregularities, Barbara announced, loud enough for the remaining passengers to hear. I'm going to need you to purchase a new ticket at the counter downstairs, or we can reseat you in economy if seats are available. Irregularities? Maya's voice cracked despite her best efforts to stay calm. What kind of irregularities? My grandmother bought this ticket 2 months ago through your website. I have documentation. I understand you believe that, Barbara said in a tone that suggested she understood nothing of the sort. But our system is showing this seat was not properly purchased. It could be a technical error, but I cannot allow you to board with an unverified ticket. Can I speak to a supervisor? Maya asked, hating the desperation creeping into her voice. I am the supervisor on duty, Barbara replied. From the boarding door, Preston's stage whispered, This is taking forever. Some of us actually paid for our seats. Maya's hands trembled as she scrolled through her phone, pulling up the credit card statement her grandmother had sent her. The confirmation number, every piece of evidence that should have been more than sufficient. She held the screen toward Barbara like a lifeline. Here, look, my grandmother's name is on the purchase, Catherine Richardson. Her billing address, the transaction date, everything. Please, just look. Barbara barely glanced at the screen. Anyone can Photoshop a document, young lady. I'm trying to protect our legitimate passengers from fraud. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Fraud. Maya felt something crack inside her, not loudly but completely, like ice breaking under invisible pressure. She was going to miss her flight. She was going to disappoint her grandmother, who had saved for months to give her this experience. She was going to prove right every doubting look, every suspicious glance, every assumption that she didn't belong in spaces like this. She was about to turn away, to accept defeat, when a hand touched her elbow. Maya flinched, expecting security, expecting the final humiliation of being escorted away. But the woman standing beside her was black, probably in her 50s, wearing a crisp business suit and carrying a leather briefcase that screamed executive authority. Her name tag identified her as Denise Howard, Monarch Airlines Operations Manager. "I'll handle this, Barbara," Denise said, her voice cool and professional. Barbara's face shifted through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, defensiveness. "Ms. Howard, I was just following protocol." "I'm sure you were," Denise interrupted smoothly. She turned to Maya, her expression softening slightly. "May I see your boarding pass, sweetheart?" Maya handed over her phone, watching as Denise scanned it with practiced efficiency, her eyes moving between the screen and her own tablet. "The ticket is valid," Denise announced after less than 30 seconds. "Purchased on March 15th, confirmed on March 16th, seat assignment made at time of purchase. No irregularities whatsoever." She fixed Barbara with a look that could have frozen fire. "Perhaps you were looking at the wrong record?" Barbara stammered something about system glitches and heavy workload, her face flushing an unflattering crimson. Denise ignored her, addressing Maya directly. "I apologize for this delay, Miss Richardson. Your seat is waiting for you." She scanned Maya's boarding pass herself, the machine producing a cheerful beep of acceptance. As Maya gathered her backpack, Denise leaned in close enough that only Maya could hear. "I'm giving you my card," she whispered, pressing a business card into Maya's palm. "If anyone gives you any trouble on this flight or any other, you call me directly." "Understood?" Maya nodded, her throat too tight for words. She walked toward the jetway on legs that felt disconnected from her body, passing Preston and his friends, who had finally gone silent. But just as she reached the door, she heard Preston's voice one last time, quieter now but still audible. "Diversity hire at the gate. Diversity passenger in first class." "That's how it works now, I guess." Maya didn't turn around. She kept walking down the jetway's slight incline, toward the aircraft door, where a flight attendant greeted her with a professional smile that showed no knowledge of what had just transpired. Inside the plane, first class was a different world: spacious leather seats, warm lighting, the subtle scent of expensive air freshener. Seat 2 was a window seat in the second row, exactly as promised. Maya slid into it, her backpack stored in the overhead bin, and finally allowed herself to breathe. The other first-class passengers were settling in around her, a man in a tailored suit across the aisle, a woman with diamond earrings one row back. No one looked at Maya with suspicion. No one questioned her presence. For a moment, just a moment, she felt the way her grandmother had wanted her to feel, like she belonged. Then Preston and his group boarded. They had first-class seats too. Of course, Preston in 3D across the aisle and one row back, his friends scattered nearby. Maya heard them before she saw them, their voices carrying that particular brand of privilege that never learned the concept of inside volume. "Oh man, this is perfect," Preston said, dropping into his seat with theatrical satisfaction. "Nothing like flying first class, right? Really separates the real passengers from the ... He paused, and Maya could feel his eyes on the back of her head. ... from the lucky ones." His friend in the baseball cap laughed. "Yeah, some people just get lucky. Or, the system makes mistakes and lets anyone in these days." Maya's fingers curled around the armrest, her nails digging into the leather. The flight attendant, a young Asian woman with kind eyes, approached with a tray of pre-departure beverages. "Would you care for champagne or orange juice, miss?" she asked Maya. Before Maya could respond, Preston spoke up from behind her. "Better check her ID before you give her alcohol. She looks pretty young to be up here without supervision." The flight attendant's smile tightened fractionally, but she maintained her professionalism. "All our first-class passengers receive the same service, sir." She turned back to Maya. "What would you like?" "Orange juice, please," Maya said quietly. She accepted the glass with a soft thank you, aware of Preston's continued commentary behind her. "See, that's smart," he stage whispered. "Play it safe. Don't want to draw more attention by breaking rules." The flight attendant's eyes flickered with something recognition, perhaps of a situation she'd seen before but couldn't directly address. She moved on to serve the other passengers, leaving Maya alone with her untouched orange juice and the weight of Preston's presence behind her. The boarding process continued. Economy passengers filing past first class with varying expressions of envy, exhaustion, or indifference. Maya kept her gaze fixed on the window, watching ground crew members move around the plane with purposeful efficiency. She tried to imagine herself anywhere else, already in Los Angeles, walking the UCLA campus. Starting fresh where no one knew her, and no one made assumptions about why she was there. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," a male voice announced over the intercom. "We're just waiting for a few more passengers and some final cargo loading. Then we'll be on our way. Shouldn't be more than 10 or 15 minutes. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for departure." The announcement triggered another wave of settling seat belts clicking, phones being switched to airplane mode, last-minute bathroom visits. Preston unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, stretching elaborately. Maya felt rather than saw him pause in the aisle beside her row. "Hey," Preston said, his voice taking on a false friendliness that made Maya's skin crawl. "I don't think we've met. I'm Preston Holbrook." He extended his hand into her peripheral vision, forcing her to either acknowledge him or commit the social sin of ignoring an offered handshake. Maya turned her head slightly, keeping her expression neutral. "Maya." She didn't take his hand. Preston withdrew it with an exaggerated shrug, as if her rudeness was expected. "Maya, cool. So, I was just curious. You going to LA for vacation or—" "College," Maya said shortly, hoping brevity would end the conversation. "Oh, which one? USC? I have friends there. Although honestly, I heard they're doing that whole affirmative action thing pretty heavy now. So the standards are kind of—" He trailed off meaningfully. Maya felt her face heat. "UCLA, full academic scholarship. 3,600 SAT, 4.0 GPA. The words came out sharper than she intended, defensive rather than proud. Preston whistled low. "Wow, impressive. Must be nice to have all those programs to help you out. My parents had to pay full tuition for me at Princeton. No special assistance or anything. There it was." The insinuation wrapped in a compliment, the suggestion that her achievements were somehow artificially inflated, that she hadn't earned what she'd been given. Maya's grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. "Don't let them make you small, baby. You earned every single thing you've achieved." But in this moment, trapped in a luxury seat that suddenly felt like a cage, Maya felt incredibly small indeed. "Excuse me, sir." The flight attendant appeared beside Preston, her professional smile firmly in place. "We need you to take your seat so we can prepare for pushback." Preston held up his hands in mock surrender. Sure. Just being friendly, you know? Making conversation." He returned to his seat, but Maya could hear him talking to his friends, his voice deliberately loud enough to carry. "Some people are just sensitive, I guess. Can't make small talk without it becoming a whole thing." Maya closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against the cool window. Outside, she could see her reflection ghosted against the gray tarmac, a girl who looked too young, too uncertain, too visibly different from everyone around her. The engines rumbled to life, a deep vibration that traveled through the aircraft's frame. Under different circumstances, Maya might have found it exciting her first time in first class, her first trip to start college, the beginning of everything she'd worked for. But Preston's presence behind her poisoned every moment, turned every comfort into a reminder of what she supposedly didn't deserve. The plane pushed back from the gate, the cabin crew going through their synchronized safety demonstration. Maya had flown enough times to know the routine by heart, but she watched anyway, grateful for something to focus on besides the conversation she could still hear behind her. "I'm just saying," Preston was telling his friends. "There's a reason first class used to mean something. Now you never know who you're going to be sitting next to. Could be actual successful people, or could be someone's charity case." "Dude, shut up," one of his friends said, sounding uncomfortable. "You're being kind of harsh." "I'm being honest," Preston countered. "There's a difference. I work hard. My family works hard. We pay for what we get. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just pointing out that the system is broken when people can skip the line." The plane taxied toward the runway, the ground blurring past Maya's window. She thought about getting up, confronting Preston directly, making him say to her face what he was content to say behind her back. But she knew how that story ended. She would be the angry black girl causing a scene, the one who couldn't handle first class, who proved she didn't belong there after all. The aircraft turned onto the runway, engines building to a high-pitched whine. Maya gripped her armrests, willing the plane to take off, to lift them all into the neutral territory of the sky, where maybe these earthbound hierarchies would matter less. But as the plane accelerated down the runway, gathering speed, Maya heard Preston's voice one more time, cutting through the engine noise with perfect clarity. "At least, it's only a 6-hour flight. I can slum it for 6 hours." Something inside Maya snapped. Not violently, but definitively. She had spent 17 years learning to shrink herself, to accept microaggressions with grace, to prove she belonged by never acknowledging that anyone thought she didn't. She had perfected the art of silent endurance, believing that if she just kept her head down and worked harder than everyone else, eventually she would earn the right to exist in spaces like this without question. But sitting in seat 2A, a seat her grandmother had sacrificed to give her, Maya realized that no amount of achievement would ever be enough for people like Preston. She could have a perfect GPA, perfect test scores, perfect everything, and he would still find ways to diminish her. Because it wasn't really about merit or qualifications. It was about making sure she knew her place, about maintaining an order where people like him never had to question whether they belonged, and people like her always did. The plane lifted off the ground. That moment of impossible defiance of gravity. Maya felt it in her stomach, the sensation of leaving Earth behind. But she didn't feel free. She felt trapped at 30,000 feet with nowhere to go, and no way to escape the suffocating presence of Preston's casual cruelty. Once they reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Preston unbuckled again. Maya heard him stand, heard the rustle of movement. She kept her eyes fixed on the clouds outside her window, trying to become invisible again. But Preston apparently had no intention of letting her disappear. "Hey, Maya," he said, leaning on the seat in front of her, inserting himself into her line of sight. "I wanted to apologize if I came across wrong earlier. I was just, curious about your situation." Maya didn't respond. She pulled her phone from her pocket, still in airplane mode, useless, and pretended to be absorbed in something on the screen. Preston continued as if she'd encouraged him. "It's just my dad works in admissions at an Ivy League school, right? And he's always talking about how the whole system has gotten so political. Like, they have these quotas they have to meet. And sometimes really qualified students get passed over for students who check certain boxes." He said, certain boxes, the way someone might say communicable diseases with a delicate distaste wrapped in false objectivity. "I earned my scholarship," Maya said, her voice low and tight. "I know you did," Preston said quickly, too quickly, his tone dripping with false reassurance. "I'm not saying you didn't work hard. I'm just saying the system is set up to give you advantages that other people don't get. That's not your fault, obviously. You're just benefiting from a broken system. The flight attendant passed by, and Maya caught her eye, trying to telepathically communicate distress. The woman paused, seeming to sense tension, but Preston's smile was so charming, his posture so non-threatening, that she apparently decided not to intervene. "Can I get you anything?" she asked, directing the question to both of them. "I'm fine," Maya said. "Actually," Preston interjected, "could I get another glass of champagne? This is a celebration, after all. We're both going off to college." He glanced at Maya with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, I mean, I've already finished my freshman year at Princeton. But you're starting at UCLA. That's great. Really great." After the flight attendant left, Preston lowered his voice, leaning closer. "You know what really gets me, though? My parents donated $500,000 to Princeton. They've given to UCLA too, actually. Generous contributions to the athletic department. And that's fine. That's how the system works for us. We pay, we support the institution, and yeah, maybe that gives our kids a little boost. But at least we're honest about it," Preston continued. "We're not pretending it's based on merit when it's really based on checking diversity boxes. That's what bugs me. The dishonesty of it all." Maya finally turned to face him fully, her jaw set. "You want honesty? Here's honesty. I've worked harder than you ever will. I've studied while working 2 part-time jobs. I've succeeded in schools that were underfunded and overcrowded. I've done all of that while dealing with people like you telling me I didn't earn it. So maybe the system isn't giving me an unfair advantage. Maybe it's just trying to level a playing field that people like you have rigged for generations." Preston's smile faltered for just a moment, a crack in his confident facade. Then it returned, harder and colder. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I try to have an honest conversation, and you make it about race. I never said anything about race." "You didn't have to," Maya said. She turned back to the window, her heart pounding, adrenaline flooding her system. She had broken her own rule. She had engaged. She had shown anger. She had refused to absorb his words with quiet dignity. Preston straightened up, his expression darkening. "You know what? You're right. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have tried to be nice to someone who clearly has a chip on their shoulder." He returned to his seat, and Maya heard him complaining to his friends in a voice that wasn't quite a whisper. "I tried to be friendly, tried to have a real conversation, and she totally attacked me. Accused me of being racist just for asking about college. That's the problem these days. You can't say anything without someone playing the victim card." Maya's hands shook in her lap. She had done exactly what she knew she shouldn't. She had let him provoke her into a response that he could now weaponize. In Preston's retelling, he would be the reasonable one trying to bridge divides, and she would be the angry girl who made everything about race. It was a trap she had walked into with her eyes open. The flight attendant returned with Preston's champagne, and Maya heard the clink of glass, the murmur of thank you. The ordinary sounds of first-class service, as if nothing had happened. As if Maya's entire existence wasn't being casually debated and dismissed just 1 row behind her. Maya pulled out her laptop, thinking she might work on something, anything to occupy her mind. But her hands were shaking too badly to type. She stared at the blank screen, seeing her own reflection in the dark glass, a girl who looked tired, hurt, and very alone despite being surrounded by people. An hour passed. Then another. The flight settled into that strange suspended existence of air travel, where time feels both endless and meaningless. The flight attendant served meals something elaborate with salmon and roasted vegetables in first class. Maya picked at hers, her appetite dead. Preston and his friends ate loudly, laughing at jokes Maya couldn't hear, but assumed she could guess. Around the 3-hour mark, Maya needed to use the restroom. She had been avoiding it, not wanting to walk past Preston's row, not wanting to give him another opportunity to engage. But biology won out over pride. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood, moving into the aisle. The first-class bathroom was at the front of the cabin, just a few steps away. Maya walked quickly, head down, hoping to make the journey invisible. But as she passed Preston's row, she heard him say to his friends, in a voice carefully calibrated to be just audible, "Watch this." Maya didn't understand what he meant until she reached for the bathroom door handle. Preston had stood up behind her, had followed her to the front of the cabin. Before she could open the door, he stepped in front of her, blocking her way. "Sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "I really need to go. Emergency situation." He opened the bathroom door and slipped inside, locking it behind him. Through the thin door, Maya heard him laugh. She stood there, frozen in the aisle, passengers from economy starting to queue behind her. She couldn't go back to her seat without using the restroom. That would be admitting defeat. But standing here, waiting while Preston deliberately delayed, was its own form of humiliation. A businessman from economy, impatient with the wait, spoke up. "Is there a problem, miss?" "No," Maya said quietly. "Just waiting." "Maybe you should use the bathroom in economy," the man suggested. "No reason to hold up first class if you're going to take forever." Maya wanted to explain that she wasn't the problem, that Preston was deliberately blocking her. But what was she supposed to say? The truth sounded paranoid, like she was making excuses. So she said nothing, just stood there with heat rising in her cheeks as the line behind her grew longer and more irritated. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 or 4 minutes, Preston emerged from the bathroom. He smiled at Maya, a smile of pure malicious satisfaction. "All yours," he said cheerfully. "Sorry for the wait. Those first-class meals, you know, go right through you." He returned to his seat while Maya entered the bathroom, her face burning. She locked the door and leaned against it, taking deep breaths, willing herself not to cry. She would not give him the satisfaction. She would not break down. When Maya returned to her seat a few minutes later, she found something waiting for her. Placed carefully on her armrest was a cocktail napkin with handwriting on it. Affirmative action, when qualified, means something different. Maya picked up the napkin with trembling fingers. She looked back at Preston's row. He was facing forward, apparently absorbed in the movie playing on his screen. But she could see the smirk tugging at his lips. She crumpled the napkin and shoved it in the seat pocket in front of her. Her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed. 3 more hours. She just had to survive 3 more hours, and then she would never have to see Preston Holbrook again. But the attacks didn't stop. Over the next hour, Maya discovered more notes, one tucked into the magazine in her seat pocket, another placed on the tray table when she returned from another bathroom trip. Each one contained a variation on the same theme. Diversity higher in Seat 2A. UCLA's standards have really dropped. Some people need more help than others. Preston was systematic in his cruelty, timing his placements for when Maya was distracted or away from her seat. He made sure the notes were small enough, subtle enough, that they wouldn't be noticed by the flight attendants or other passengers. This was a private war, a targeted campaign of psychological warfare designed to make Maya feel exactly how Preston thought she should feel: unworthy, illegitimate, out of place. Maya gathered each note and put them in her backpack. She wasn't sure why she was keeping them, evidence maybe, or just a masochistic need to document her own humiliation. By the time the captain announced they were beginning their descent into Los Angeles, Maya had collected 7 handwritten attacks. 7 small pieces of paper that somehow weighed more than her entire backpack. The plane descended through layers of clouds, Los Angeles spreading out below in its vast grid of lights and highways. Under different circumstances, Maya would have been excited. This was her new home, her new beginning. But all she felt was exhausted and diminished, as if Preston had spent 6 hours slowly erasing her until she was barely there at all. The wheels touched down with a slight bump, the reverse thrust of the engines loud in the cabin. Passengers began immediately unbuckling seatbelts and standing, everyone eager to escape the confines of the aircraft after 6 hours. Maya remained seated, waiting for the crowd to thin. She had no desire to jostle with Preston and his friends in the narrow aisle. But Preston apparently had one move to make. As the first-class cabin cleared out, he paused beside Maya's row. She didn't look up, but she could feel him standing there, feel the weight of his attention. "Hey, Maya," Preston said, his voice oddly gentle. "I hope you know I wasn't trying to be mean. I was just being honest. Sometimes honesty feels like an attack when you're sensitive about certain things." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his boarding pass. Before Maya could react, he ripped it in half, then ripped the halves again, tearing his own boarding pass into confetti. Then, slowly and deliberately, he opened his hands and let the pieces rain down onto Maya's lap. "Oops," Preston said. "Looks like your ticket got destroyed. Better keep better track of your things. Wouldn't want anyone to think you're not supposed to be here." He walked away, his friends following, their laughter echoing back through the empty first-class cabin. Maya sat paralyzed, small white pieces of boarding pass scattered across her black jeans like snow. She understood the message. Preston's boarding pass, shredded onto her lap, was a symbolic destruction of her own right to be there. He was telling her that her presence in first class, in UCLA, in any space he occupied, was as invalid and disposable as torn paper. The flight attendant who had served Maya earlier appeared, noticing her still seated while the cabin emptied. "Miss, are you all right?" Maya looked up at her, then down at the paper in her lap. Maya started, then stopped. What was she supposed to say? A boy tore up his own boarding pass and dropped it on me? It sounded absurd. "I'm fine," Maya said, her voice hollow. "Just trying to collect myself before I get off." The flight attendant's eyes moved to the scattered paper, and something in her expression suggested she understood more than Maya had said. "Would you like me to call a supervisor? Or airline security?" "For what?" Maya asked bitterly. What crime was committed? What rule was broken? The flight attendant hesitated, and Maya saw in her face the same powerlessness that Maya felt. They both knew that what Preston had done was wrong, knew that his behavior had crossed countless lines of decency. But those lines weren't written in any official handbook. There was no policy against passive-aggressive note-leaving, no regulation against symbolic gestures of dominance. Preston had been careful. He had never touched Maya, never explicitly threatened her, never done anything that could be captured on a security recording and labeled as assault or harassment. He had simply made her 6-hour flight a psychological gauntlet, all while maintaining plausible deniability. "I'm sorry," the flight attendant said quietly. "Really? I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've seen ... She trailed off, shaking her head. "I wish I could do more." Maya gathered the pieces of boarding pass from her lap and stuffed them into the now bulging pocket of her backpack. She stood up, retrieving her bag from the overhead bin, and walked down the aisle on legs that felt disconnected from her body. She moved through the jetway in a daze, emerging into LAX Terminal 4. The gate area was chaos, passengers rushing to connecting flights, families reuniting, the general controlled panic of a major airport. Maya stood at the edge of it all, her backpack heavy on her shoulder, trying to figure out where she was supposed to go next. Then she saw Preston and his friends near the gate, gathered in a loose circle. They were laughing about something, probably recounting their harassment as a funny story, a bit of entertainment to break up the boredom of air travel. Maya felt a surge of rage so pure it momentarily cleared the fog of exhaustion. She started walking toward them, her fists clenched, her prepared speech forming in her mind. She would confront him properly this time, in public, where there were witnesses. She would make him acknowledge what he'd done, force him to either defend his actions or admit his cruelty. But she had taken only 3 steps when she noticed a commotion at the airline desk. Barbara, the gate agent from JFK, was there, along with Denise Howard, the operations manager who had helped Maya board. They were talking to a man in a dark suit airport security, based on his badge and radio. Maya's heart sank. She realized with sudden, crushing certainty that Preston's final move wasn't just symbolic. The torn boarding pass hadn't been about metaphor. It had been about creating doubt, about planting the seed that Maya's documentation wasn't legitimate. And sure enough, as Maya watched, Barbara pointed directly at her. The security officer looked in Maya's direction, then started walking toward her. Preston had set one last trap, and Maya had walked right into it. The security officer was a tall black man in his 40s, his expression professionally neutral. "Miss Richardson?" he asked, stopping in front of Maya. "Yes?" Maya's throat felt tight. "I'm Officer Marcus Webb. I need you to come with me for a moment. There's been a question raised about your boarding documentation." Maya's world tilted. "What question?" "I showed my boarding pass at the gate in New York. I have it on my phone." "I understand," Officer Webb said, his tone not unkind but firm. "It's just a routine verification. Won't take long." He gestured toward a small office near the gate. Maya glanced back at Preston. He was watching now, no longer pretending not to be interested. His smile was the smile of someone watching a plan come together perfectly. Maya wanted to scream, to run, to disappear into the crowd and never be found. Instead, she followed Officer Webb toward the office, feeling the eyes of everyone in the gate area following her. She was being singled out again, marked as suspicious, pulled from the crowd for special scrutiny. Behind her, she heard Preston's voice, loud enough to carry. "See? I told you something was off." The system caught it. Inside the small office, Officer Webb gestured for Maya to sit. Denise Howard was already there, along with Barbara and another airline official Maya didn't recognize. The walls felt like they were closing in. "Miss Richardson," the unfamiliar official began, consulting a tablet. "I'm Robert Chun, station manager for Monarch Airlines. We received a report that your boarding pass may have been fraudulently obtained." "From who?" Maya demanded. "Who reported that?" "We're not required to disclose that information," Chun said. "What we need is for you to provide verification of your ticket purchase credit card statement, photo ID, any documentation that proves you legitimately purchased or were gifted this ticket." Maya pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Navigating to her email, pulling up every document her grandmother had forwarded. She showed them the confirmation email, the receipt, the credit card statement with Catherine Richardson's name clearly visible. Chun examined each document carefully, his expression giving nothing away. Barbara stood in the corner with her arms crossed, looking vindicated, as if Maya's very presence in this office proved her initial suspicions correct. "The credit card is in your grandmother's name," Barbara pointed out. "How do we know you have authorization to use it?" "Because she gave it to me as a gift," Maya said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "That's how gifts work. Someone buys something for someone else. Do you have anything from your grandmother stating that she purchased this ticket for you?" Chun asked. "A letter, a text message, anything written?" Maya scrolled through her phone, finding the text message thread with her grandmother. She held up a message from 2 months ago. "Bought your ticket, baby. First class, just like you deserve. Love you so much." So proud of you. Chun looked at the message, then at the documentation, then at Officer Webb. Something unspoken passed between them. Finally, Chun set down his tablet. Miss Richardson, I apologize for this inconvenience. Your ticket is clearly legitimate. The report we received was... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Unfounded. Barbara's expression soured. But the system showed nothing except your mishandling of this passenger's check-in. Denise Howard interrupted sharply. Both in New York and now here in Los Angeles. This is the second time you've questioned this young woman's right to fly. Despite having clear documentation, she turned to Chun. I want a full review of Barbara's interactions with passengers over the past year. This pattern of behavior is unacceptable. Barbara's face went pale. I was just doing my job. I was trying to prevent fraud. You were profiling, Officer Webb said quietly. I've been in law enforcement for 20 years, ma'am. I know what profiling looks like. Chun stood up, effectively ending the meeting. Miss Richardson, again, I apologize. You're free to go. Your luggage is being held at baggage claim. We'll have someone escort you there and help you retrieve it. What about the person who made the false report? Maya asked, her voice stronger now. What happens to them? Chun and Webb exchanged glances again. We'll look into it, Chun said, which Maya recognized as code for nothing will happen. Of course you will, Maya said bitterly. She stood, shouldering her backpack. Thank you for finally believing me, I guess. Only took showing my entire life history to prove I wasn't lying. She walked out of the office, Officer Webb following at a respectful distance. In the gate area, Preston and his friends were gone, probably already collecting their luggage. Already moving on to whatever privileged adventure awaited them in Los Angeles. The incident on the plane already fading into a funny story they'd tell at parties. Maya stood in the middle of the terminal, people flowing around her like water around a stone. She felt scraped raw, every interaction having peeled away another layer of her dignity until she was standing here exposed and exhausted. Officer Webb approached gently. Miss Richardson, can I walk you to baggage claim? Maya nodded mutely, falling into step beside him. They walked in silence for a while, moving through the airport's endless corridors, past shops and restaurants and gates. Finally, Webb spoke. I have a daughter about your age. She's starting Howard University in the fall. Full ride, academic scholarship, just like you. Maya glanced at him, surprised. She's smart as hell, Webb continued, his voice softer now, more personal. Works harder than anyone I know. And I know she's going to face what you faced today. People questioning whether she earned her place, assuming she's only there because of quotas or charity or anything except her own merit. He stopped walking, turning to face Maya fully. I want you to know something. What happened to you today on that plane, at both gates, that wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't deserve it. And despite what people like that boy on your flight want you to believe, you absolutely earned your place at UCLA. Maya felt tears welling up, the first one she'd allowed since this whole nightmare began. It doesn't feel like it, she whispered. It feels like no matter what I do, no matter how hard I work, there's always going to be someone telling me I don't belong. There probably will be, Webb said honestly. That's the truth, and I won't lie to you about it. But you know what else is true? You're still here. You survived today. You didn't let that boy break you, even though he tried. You stood up for yourself. You had documentation, and you proved you belong in that seat. He smiled slightly. My daughter told me something last week that stuck with me. She said, Dad, I used to want to be so good that nobody could question me. But I realized that's impossible. Some people will question me no matter what. So instead, I'm going to be so good that I don't need their validation. That's what you need to remember, Miss Richardson. You don't need Preston's validation. You don't need Barbara's approval. You have your scholarship, your acceptance, your future. That's real. Their doubts aren't. They resumed walking, Maya blinking back tears. When they reached baggage claim, her suitcase was already waiting, set aside by airline staff. Officer Webb helped her retrieve it, making sure she had everything. "Thank you," Maya said, "for believing me, for understanding." "I'm sorry it took so long," Webb replied. "And I'm sorry you had to prove yourself at all. But for what it's worth, you handled yourself with a grace and strength that a lot of adults couldn't manage. You should be proud." After Webb left, Maya stood alone in the baggage claim area, her life condensed into one backpack and one suitcase. She pulled out her phone and called her grandmother. Catherine Richardson answered on the second ring. "Baby, did you land? How was your first-class flight?" Maya tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. All the emotion she'd been holding back for 6 hours crashed over her at once. "Maya? Honey, what's wrong?" "It was awful, Grandma," Maya sobbed. "There was this boy, and he was so mean, and they didn't believe my ticket was real. And The story poured out in fragments, disjointed and emotional, but capturing the essential cruelty of what had happened. Catherine listened without interrupting, her breath audible on the line. When Maya finally finished, there was a long pause. "Baby," Catherine said, her voice trembling with barely controlled fury, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. Are you listening?" "Yes, ma'am. What happened to you today is a preview. It's not the whole movie, but it's a preview of what some people are going to try to do to you for the rest of your life. They're going to try to make you small. They're going to question your credentials, doubt your achievements, assume you didn't earn what you have. And you know why they do that? Why? Because your success threatens their worldview. They've been taught that the world is supposed to work a certain way, with certain people in certain places. When you show up somewhere they think you don't belong, looking different than they expect, it doesn't compute. Instead of examining their own assumptions, they attack you." Catherine's voice grew stronger. "But here's what you need to know. Their attacks have nothing to do with your actual worth. That boy on the plane, those gate agents, they don't know you. They don't know how hard you worked, how many hours you studied, how much you sacrificed. They just see a threat to their comfortable hierarchy, and they lash out. How do I deal with it?" "Maya,"